2010, a teenage girl and her best friend had what seemed like the perfect plan: get their single parents together and become sisters. The plan worked better than they could have imagined. Their parents began dating and soon decided to move in together as a family. When they found a gorgeous 6-bedroom house on Craigslist for an unbelievably low price, it all felt too good to be true, and it was. What started as a dream home would become a nightmare that would make even the biggest skeptic believe in the supernatural. You won't want to miss this one.
Okay, so my name is Allie. I live in Aldergrove, British Columbia. Yeah, so I have what I think is a bit of a crazy story. My dad, who is a major skeptic, he became a definite believer after this situation. It started it was the September of 2010. I had a best friend, and when we were both, she was 14 and I was 15, my dad was single and her mom was single, so we thought that we should do the ultimate thing and make our parents together. And then we could not only be best friends, but we could be siblings. So we did that, and it actually worked, and our parents dated for a while, and then we decided let's all be a happy family and move in together. But the house that they were living in was too small, and the house that we were living in was too small, so we decided to find a house together, and we had picked Aldergrove. And at that time, Craigslist was the place to find places to rent. So that's where we went. We went onto Craigslist and we found this home, and we went and we looked at it, and it was gorgeous. Like, I couldn't even imagine living in a house this nice. I couldn't understand how it was the price that it was. It was only $1,800 a month to rent. And it was a huge house. It was 6 bedrooms. It was in a U shape, and then it had a hot tub deck in the middle, and all of our bedrooms had either French doors or sliding doors onto the patio deck. It was just very unique, very gorgeous, on a huge amount of property. The backyard, like where our French doors opened up, there was a hill and it went down, and they had like a lake in the backyard. It was absolutely gorgeous. We obviously we're like, yes, of course we're going to take this. And then when it came to moving day, the owners were like, oh, do you want a bed? Do you want a couch? They basically were like, here, just take all the furniture. We're moving to the Baja. And at the time, we didn't think it was weird. We just thought, oh, well, they're just moving and they're moving to somewhere smaller and they don't have all this place for this furniture. We didn't think it was they were trying to get the heck out of Dodge. But we soon found out that was definitely the reason. So we moved in and everything was fairly normal. We had a Halloween party in October, and we invited a huge amount of people, like my friends, my sister's friends, my dad's friends, everybody. It was probably around 100 people in the house and like around the area. And then about a week later, me and my sister were home, and we heard this massive bang. Like the whole house went bang, and all the animals were like, my dog was barking and the cats were standing, and all their hair was like standing on end. And my sister and I were like, what's that? Like, what was that? And we couldn't figure it out. So we were like, okay, well, that was really weird. I guess my sister, she had heard whispering, like when she was in the living room, she heard whispering like the days following. And a week after that, she moved out. She was like, you guys are crazy for staying in this house, like I'm leaving. And she moved to her dad's house. So then it was just me, my dad, my stepmom, and we had a tenant down below. We had the living room, and then it had a spiral staircase down to the basement, and it was an unfinished basement, but off to the side there was a room, and in that room was kind of like a studio apartment, a very small one, but that's where he lived. Probably about a month later, I was in the living room, and I hear what sounds like someone coming down the hallway and then come into the kitchen, open up cupboards, turn on a tap as if they were getting like a drink of water or something. And I'm like, oh, Dad, like I asked him a question. I don't remember what the question was now, but I asked him something and I didn't hear a response. And so I'm like, why aren't you answering me, kind of thing. So I go into the kitchen and the sink's running and the cupboard's open, but there's nobody there. So I'm like, oh, well, maybe he just left or something. But then I clue in that I hear the lawnmower running, and he's down, like way, way down in the lawn, like way out in the field mowing the lawn. There's no way he could have made that time within like 5 seconds. So it wasn't him. My stepmom was at work and my sister wasn't living with us. So I was like, that was really weird, but okay. So turn the tap off, close the door. Things are starting to kind of ramp up. So now, like, I'm hearing voices, my stepmom's hearing voices. We're telling my dad about this stuff, and he's like, you guys are crazy. Like, there's nothing happening here. And while this is going on, my dad one time he came home and he found laundry, like, shoved in, like, the washer, like, literally exploding with laundry. And he's, like, looking through the clothes, like, where did this stuff even come from? Like, this isn't Allie's, this isn't, like, my wife's. Like, where is this clothes coming from? And so he's thinking we're doing all these weird things, and he comes home and, like, the taps are on, and, like, the bathroom was flooded one day, and he's like, what are these girls doing? Like, get your head straight, kind of thing. So then this is progressively, things are ramping up. And so now my mental health is depleting. Even when there wasn't something happening, you always felt like something was watching you. And if you didn't feel like something was watching you, then you would have a nightmare. Like, it was almost every day something was happening. I don't know about Morgan because she had left so early, but for me, I had horrific nightmares, and I don't even know how to, like, yes, of course, the typical, like, demonic nightmares, and something's watching you, and there's something dark around you. You just kind of dream of shadows. But there was also these really, really, the best, I know it's swearing, but, like, mind dreams. Like, they were horrible, like things you don't even want to talk about, like just completely messed with your mind. And when you wake up, you're like, is that a reality? How could that person do that to me? Did that even happen? Like, is this a recalled memory? I had a lot of dreams of, like, being choked. So like black hands, like, choking me, or like there was a lot of dreams where I would be laying in my bed and there was, like, dark shadowy figures around me, like clawing at me, grabbing at me, like pulling at me. But physically, no, it was just dreams. But the dreams, you almost felt like you were awake. Like, you could sleep a whole night and you would not feel rested because your dreams are just so vivid and constantly happening. It was almost like you were running a marathon throughout your sleep. So I slipped into a really bad depression. And I went to my grandma, who she's extremely Catholic. And so she's like, it's demons, it must be demons. So she came over and she did an exorcism because that's what she thought this was. So she's literally running around the house with holy water and rosaries, and my dad is thinking, these girls are crazy. What is going on in this house? Which ended up, I think, provoking whatever it was. So nothing had got better, and I wasn't really sure if this was reality or if I was going crazy, because my dad is saying, no, you guys are nuts. Oh my God, I'm getting, like, chills. One time I had a dream about this thing that was, like, horned with, like, a long tail, and it had, like, toad-hooved feet, and it was huge. And it was just dark. Like, I couldn't see color or anything about that, but I could just see, like, the outline of the scaly, hooved, long thing. And it would never come around the bed, but it was always just, like, behind my bed in the room that I had, because it was literally a solarium. All of the rooms were different, but they all had doors going out to the patio. But this one was, I think it was a solarium, and they turned it into a room. So I had my bed in this kind of cove area, and so it was just windows all around me, and I didn't have it up against the wall, so I could just kind of put, like, lights and little things behind it. It was like peer over the side. Like, you could see, like, the outline of scales slightly, but it had like a yellow eye, kind of yellow, more like orange, but just looked evil, like just so evil. The thing that, like, was the pivotal moment of, okay, I either am going completely bonkers, or this is like a parallel universe or something, was I was in the shower. You know how I was saying like the water sometimes like would be left on and the bathroom would be flooded, so there was a lot of activity in the bathroom. Well, we had one bathroom that had a shower. We had like 4 bathrooms, but only one of them had like the shower in the bathroom and stuff. So anyway, so I was in the shower and I could just feel something behind me, but again, I'm trying to just say, oh, it's all in your head, it's all in your head. And then I felt something touch me. Like I felt a hand go down my back, and I know it was a hand because it was cold and I could feel 5 fingers and I felt it touch my back. And I just screamed and I jumped out of the bathroom, grabbed my towel and just ran, like literally ran out of the house in a towel, and it was like, okay, well now what do I do? Because now I have no phone and no way, and I'm just like in a towel, like tiptoeing through the house trying to find my phone and run back out of the house and call my dad. And so I ended up going to the hospital because I was just I didn't know what was real anymore. Like it was so bad. And I ended up living there for a month. Then my dad and stepmom came to the hospital and they said, you're not crazy. There is something going on with the house. Because I guess when I was gone, then it was only my dad and my stepmom. So there's nobody else who could be doing these things, and things were still happening and getting worse. For example, the stuff that my dad seen was he would be in bed and he'd see like the door handle jiggling into the bedroom, lights turning on and off. The front door, it was the weirdest front door. It had keys to the front, like to the inside and the outside. Complete like fire hazard. Like if you didn't have a key to get out of the house, then you would like have to bust a window or something to get out or go a different door. The front door, the point of that is that there's no way that the front door could lock unless you had the key. So if you went out the front door and you didn't lock it behind you, there's no way that the door could lock because you have to have a key to do it, right? Anyway, so he had went out and the door would be locked, and he like to come back inside and he's like, what? It's like the door's locked, I'm home alone, like what is going on here? And he's like banging at the windows and stuff like that, and he saw a shadow like pass by, and he's like still going at the door, and all of a sudden the door unlocked, and then he was like, what is going on? Like my dad's friend who was the tenant, he lived downstairs, and unfortunately he's not alive anymore, so we can't really ask him, but he would not talk about, he only lasted a month, not even a full month actually. He gave some excuse of like, oh, I want to be in Surrey. My dad's like, well, you work all over the place, like, you know, and he's like, no, I'm moving. And then a few years later when my dad was talking about the house, he said, yeah, I had experiences. He's like, that basement was, and all of us were terrified to go down in that basement. It looked like they had it as set up as a shop, like the old owner had it as his shop. And so along the front side, it was like a workbench that was physically built in. And then to the right it looked like there was more like turntables, like music stuff, like all from the 70s. And then to the right was all still their stuff. Like they had boxes and boxes of all their stuff. And that's where my dad thinks that when he looks back now, he thinks that that's where the clothes came from for the laundry, because when he was pulling all the clothes out of the washer, he's like, this isn't Allie's, this isn't Morgan's, this isn't my wife's, like whose clothes is this? So he suspects that it came from those boxes downstairs. It's not like things happen down there like they did in the living room and the kitchen, but it just felt so evil down there, so dark and so evil. And when you were in other parts of the house, you felt watched, but when you were downstairs, it felt like something was like right behind you, like physically like looming over you right behind you, like at any second you could be grabbed or touched. If you went in the basement or if you had to get something from the basement or put something in the basement, you would run, like literally run, or I would just like avoid doing it. My dad said, oh, go put that in the basement. I'd be like, yeah. But the living room, like I wouldn't sit in the living room unless there was somebody else in the living room. It was something about the living room and kitchen area that was, that was where all the activity happened. And so it's interesting because that was an addition. The living room and the kitchen was an addition to the original home that was there. So I'm not really sure if that plays anything into it, but I guess because now like Morgan's out of the house, which is my stepsister, me, the tenant, and it's just them alone in the house. And so when she wasn't home, he saw doorknobs like shaking to get in. He would hear the voices and he knew like, oh, there's no way, like I know I didn't leave that TV on. Or he would hear things down the hallway and he knew that his like wife was away working, and she worked in Surrey at the time, which is like approximately half an hour to 45 minutes away from our house. I got back from the hospital, and during that time period I had a boyfriend who also thought that I'm crazy, which didn't really help. We were just kind of hanging at home. I hadn't gone back to school yet, and he was over at the house, and it was just him and I. My dad was at work, my stepmom was at work. We're sitting in my room and the door's closed, and we hear footsteps down the hallway. And not only do we hear the footsteps down the hallway, we see like a shadow pass in front of the door, like, you know, how footsteps would be, right? Well, we see those shadows too. And all the color just drained from his face. And I'm like, I told you. And then as soon as that moment passed, we're like, okay, well, what do we do now? Because now we're home alone, and like, we just saw this thing go by. So we basically just camped out in the room, and I called my dad to leave work, and he came and rescued us essentially, which was just coming home and getting us out of the house. And then that same night, my boyfriend had spent the night because I was too scared to sleep alone. And we're woken up to someone in the kitchen, and then we hear smashing, like all the pans and pots and stuff it sounds like someone's like taking them out and just smashing them all over the kitchen. So we're like, what the hell is going on? Like, so we all come out of the bedrooms and we look, and all the stuff in the kitchen is just all over the ground. Rice and flour and just stuff is all over the kitchen. And we're like, nobody wanted to go in there because we were terrified of what's going on, right? So we all just kind of like retreated back into our rooms. And the way the house was situated was, it was like a U like this, and this back part, the entire back part, was the main bedroom. I guess it used to be an original trailer, and they just turned it into a huge room. So that was my parents' room, and we all just kind of hid in that room for the night. The next morning we go out, and it literally looked like something was like walking through all the the flour and the rice and the oatmeal and stuff. It looked like something had walked through it. It looked like there was something that had 3 toes, like scuffing, but it did look like there was like 3-toed feet walking through. So then for the next bit, we ended up just kind of staying all in that one room. We all just kind of slept in that room together. And then when that wasn't obviously sustainable, that only lasted a couple days, I asked my boyfriend's parents if I could live with them, and I moved out. And then my stepmom and my dad are now fighting like crazy, and she ends up moving out. So then now it's just my dad alone in the house, and he's never missed a day of work, and he never gets sick, but he was so sick from not sleeping and having all this stuff happening around the house that, you know, he's never believed before, and then now it's like happening to him, that he ended up not going to work. One of those days, like I can't remember exactly what it was, but he had taken a day off, like a whole week of work. And so I went to the house and I was like, well, why don't we set up a camera? Like, we had a video camera. So we did, and we set it up in the living room, which seemed to be like, the living room and kitchen seemed to be like the most active. That night it was lots of, like, it sounded like a TV was on or whispering. We couldn't really tell, but we could hear voices. We heard like walking around, which is mostly what we heard throughout the whole span of this time we lived there. The next morning we checked the camera, and so where the camera was faced, there was this wall, and at the back of the wall it had a built-in record player, because it was a very, very old house, and it had, like, you know, that orange stained glass from the 70s. It had that, and it had lights behind that, and so the lights were always on. And then it had like a chandelier. It looked like something had passed in front of that, because it looked like the lights were kind of going in and out. And then off the living room was where my bedroom used to be, and the door was like half open, and so we see this something pass in front, and then we see the door kind of open, and we're just like, what? Like, this is real, like this is actually, like, we caught this on film. And then I guess my dad said he doesn't really talk about what happened to him when he was alone at the house, but he said that he ended up taking that video camera, like the whole video camera, and burning it because he said that it pissed it off so much. Yeah, he went and burnt it in the back of the yard because he's like, I don't even know what else to do. This one time, we came home, was a fireplace in the living room. So actually the fireplace was like, the kitchen living room was like this, and the fireplace was in the middle, like in an island, and then you could walk around the fireplace. And so in that fireplace, when we came home, there was a log that had been burnt, and nobody was there because this tenant downstairs had moved out already. So now at this point, it's just me, my dad, and my stepmom. And like, yeah, Morgan came and visited all the time. She just didn't live in the house. There was a log that had been burnt, and we didn't use the fireplace because, you know, like insurance and all that type of stuff. Like, we don't know the last time the chimney was cleaned. So we never used it. So it's like, did someone break in and burn a log in our house? Like, and as you saw, like, we are off the beaten path. So it's not like people are breaking in out there. Like, it's not like in the inner cities or something. So during that week that he was off, on the property, like, it was a very, very long driveway. And we lived at the top, and then at the very bottom, there was a trailer that I guess the owner also had rented out. And so he went down to that trailer and was like, I'm going to sound crazy to you guys, but do you have any weird things happening here? And the guy looked him dead in the eye and said, he was this Jamaican man, and he's like, no, man. He's like, yeah, we have weird stuff happening, but probably not as bad as happening at your house. And my dad was like, wow, this is like, what? And so he said, yeah, like when they first moved here, it sounded like someone was breaking into their house, and he would get up in the middle of the night with a bat, and there'd be nobody there, but the window would be open or the door would be open. And it's like, I know I locked the door and stuff like that. I guess the guy was also kind of thinking if he was crazy, but I guess they had lived with it for so long that they're like, oh, this just lives in our house. And so the guy said, my friend is a medium or shaman, or I don't know, some friend that he had. And he said, if you're up for it, like, would you be interested in having him come to the property and trying to communicate? And my dad was like, sure, like, I'm leaving. Just do whatever you want. Like, I'm not living here anymore. So sure. So he came, and apparently what was discovered, the original owner of the house, so when we rented the property, there was a man and a wife. The man looked about 100 years old, and the wife looked probably 50. And so the man had a wife, and they were originally building the house. And that was that original addition where the main bedroom was. And then the wife died of cancer, and he got a new wife. And then that new wife, they started building the rest of the house. Her daughter died. What this medium had discovered was that it was like this spiritual warfare between the wife, the daughter, and allegedly there was this other entity who lived there from the 1800s with the original property owner who still lived there. So they're all like fighting over who is going to live on this property. That's what he said, right? Like, how do you fact check that? The only thing I could fact check is, yes, the wife did die, and yes, the daughter did die. She died on the street in a car crash coming out of the parking lot. Like, coming out of our driveway, I should say. Those people did actually pass away. So I don't know if like the medium knew that or what. This is what kind of like made me believe the medium more, because we never told them what avenues we tried to get rid of whatever was in the house. Like, we never said, oh, we tried this or we tried that. We just said, this is what we're experiencing. And so when the medium came, she said that he didn't say when my grandma came, but she said that someone who came who was spreading holy water or something like that, they were chasing it around the room. And so remember when I was saying like my grandma and my aunt were physically going around my room, like they were going into my closet and they're going under my bed and they were going all over the room. Well, this person said that they were feeling that they were chasing this thing around the room. So I don't know, but apparently this person physically saw, like when they were regaining, however they do their psychic, whatever they do, they saw this thing being chased around the room by my grandma, who was throwing holy water around the room. I was born and raised Ukrainian Catholic. There is no good entities. It's just like when someone dies, they go to heaven or they go to hell, and that's it. And so there's no like, oh, if your grandpa comes, that's nice. It's like, no, you're either crazy because you think you're experiencing spirits, or you're not, and it's just like a cat walking by or something. There's no middle ground. And so even if there was a good entity in our house, like, not, how do I say this, not good, but just like someone who's passed on, my grandma still would have done the things that she did, because in her mind she's trying to pass them along or get them to where they need to go or get them out of the house. So I don't think my grandma physically knew what she was doing. She was just trying to get something out of the house. Before I had went to the hospital, before my dad had said, oh, this is reality, my dad was at the grocery store in Aldergrove, just like at the local grocery store, and he ran into a friend from way back when, like someone he knew in high school. He's like, oh, hey, how's it going? And like, oh, what are you doing in Aldergrove? And my dad said that, oh, we moved here and stuff. He's like, yeah, my dad was describing, oh, it's this beautiful house and it has a lake and there's fish in it. I can go fishing. And he's just talking about this house. And the guy says, he starts describing the house. He says, is it like a house? It's got a U and there's a hot tub deck. And my dad's like, yeah, that's the house off 10th Avenue. He's like, yeah. He's like, oh, I heard some crazy went down at that house. Oh, sorry. But he's like, oh, like, what do you mean? And he said, oh, well, yeah, I went there to do some electrician work, and it was my day off, and so I went there with my wife. And when my wife was walking around with the owner's wife, and the owner's wife was saying that she can't live in this house anymore because she's seeing like apparitions of her daughter all over the property, and so she doesn't know if she's going crazy or if she's really seeing these things, and so they're leaving, they're selling everything, and they're going to the Baja. And so my dad had heard that, and he was like, kind of like, oh yeah, okay, like. And so then when this medium said it's the spiritual warfare between the daughter and the wife, he's like, what? Like,
after our interview, Allie reached out to her father to dig for additional information or any memories that he had. And in fact, she shared these texts with me. Allie's stepmother had a grandson who was just a baby at the time and was over at the house visiting. At the time, the stepmom was in the kitchen with him in the living room, and she came back to him taken out of his car seat. Days after the interview, the plan was for Allie to call her father and record him answering just a few questions because she thought it would be great for the interview. However, her father simply couldn't. He was too terrified to relive the moments he had endured at the house alone. It brings him back to the most frightening moments of his life. He felt that when you're fighting the supernatural, you're helpless and there's nothing you can do.
After on, I realized that it was just what was going on, but during that time period, I also thought I was going through dietary problems because I was always nauseous too. Like, I was always feeling sick and I was getting headaches. And so then I thought, oh, well, maybe there's something going on with what I'm eating, or maybe I'm not drinking enough water or something like that. But nothing I did, I still had that problem. But after I moved out, the problem was gone. So then I looked back and, well, must have been what was going on, because other people were experiencing that too. Morgan had moved out. I was living at my boyfriend's house, and I can't live there because I was just temporarily living with his family. And my dad was like, oh, well, at this time I was 19 years old. So he's like, that's, she needs to be living at home and working on her schooling and not just living at a boyfriend's house. He wasn't with his girlfriend anymore. And so and then also because now she's not living there, they're not together anymore. So now it's just his income taking care of the house. And yes, the rent wasn't that much to heat a house of that size. And we had to pay for water of a house of that size. And there was a lot of bills that, one person can't do. And then, like I was saying, he had never missed work. And so for him to be physically sick and not sleeping for a week, he was just like, this is crazy. And I think at the end of it, he ended up living at my grandma's house until we were like, okay, we can go in and move all the stuff. Like, we made sure we made a day that we all would be there together, so nobody was alone at the house, because we were physically like scared for our safety, because if whatever this is can physically pick up a pot and a pan and move doors and stuff, is like what's stopping it from physically hurting us or touching me in the shower. Like, it's no longer there. Actually, I went to take my daughter there. So I actually only live a few blocks away from it now. But ironically, like in this weird twist of events, like we lived in the house, we all moved out, and I moved to Surrey, and my stepmom moved away. Like, we all moved away. And then when I was older and looking to purchase a home, I was like, oh, Aldergrove's pretty cheap. So I ended up purchasing a home like rather close to it. But anyways, I was telling my daughter, like, oh, I used to live in a house really close to here. Do you want to go look at it? And so we drove down, and it's completely gone now. The whole house is demolished. I tried actually going back into historical records and trying to find how the land was plotted out, but I didn't really know what to look for. But according to the median, yeah, there was an owner in the 1800s, and he owned it and died, or something to do with arrowheads. Like, I don't know how truthful or accurate that is, but that's what they said. And then there was this new owner that bought it in the 40s, I believe, and then he owned it. Well, now that I'm older and like now I'm a mom, so now I have this like mama bear mentality about me. If I was me now living in that house without children, like I would never put my children through that, probably would have, maybe invited some paranormal people into it, or maybe tried to go to a historian and done more research on the property, and like tried to see what I could figure out more. But definitely, if I already had went to the hospital because I'm thinking I'm going crazy, or things can physically touch you, because from what I hear, there's entities that can't really break through the veil and they can't touch you, but sometimes they can, or some things can touch you. And if this thing or things were physically able to touch us and touch things, then who knows what could have happened if we stayed longer. I'm honestly curious, though, of like if the people who live there now experience things, if somebody from the 1800s was still living there and it was a completely new house, then who knows if the spirits, like the wife and the daughter, are still there, right? Like where we live, like we live about an hour and a half from Harrison, which is like Sasquatch country. Almost so many people who go way up in that area, they all have heard like the tree knocking and the whooping, and like the amount of experience that people have had out here, especially like at the 4x4 community and the camping community and stuff. It's just like common knowledge. We have a lot of like UFO stuff here. Like they say Aldergrove's like a UFO hotspot, and so many people that I know say that they've saw like, the black triangle where it has the yellow, like so many people, like almost everybody I know has said that they've saw that at one point living in Aldergrove. In a way, it's kind of made me more of a skeptic, if that, it's hard to explain. So it makes me more of a skeptic because when people say like, oh, I thought I heard something, or I put this thing down somewhere and then it appeared somewhere else, it's like, because I have had real legitimate things happen to me and my entire family, now I'm like, okay, maybe it's just a slip of the mind, or maybe you thought you heard something. And so now I'm more skeptical of when people say that they are having legitimate experiences, and then when they explain it more, or I hear stories more, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's believable, or I could see that happening, or how some people just like to embellish stories or say that they've had these things happen, can legitimately vouch for how you feel when those things happen, or what it's like when those things actually happen. I came to your channel because I wanted to hear other people's experiences. Yeah, like see how, if it is like intertwined, or if they're all separate things, or like, is the whole Sasquatch and UFO thing, is that a separate thing than the like spirit world, or is that all connected, or like, it's just, I don't know, maybe someone has the answer. I don't know, but it's definitely, it's not that like it's all the content I consume, but it's definitely a big part of my life now. Like I'm not sitting here like researching constantly, but I definitely enjoy hearing other people's experience. It kind of makes like more of a community that yeah, it is a reality, and like you're not crazy, and don't go and medicate yourself a bunch, because these things do actually happen to people, and like reputable everyday normal people. You don't choose these things. Like, yes, some people who are paranormal hunters, they run into it, guns a blazing, but there are just normal everyday people who go out in the wilderness, or move into a house and something crazy happens to them. So I think that when you feel like something's happening or think like something's happening, to trust your instincts 100%. Like, yes, you could have maybe mistakenly put your glasses somewhere, and you thought you put them somewhere else and now they're somewhere else. Yes, that does happen. But if you feel like, if that happens and you feel uneasy and you hear voices, like, it's not always that you're going crazy. You should trust your instincts.